Hi, everybody.
Hello, Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
Are you all right with us recording this, Wendy?
Oh, sure.
Right, cool. So we are almost 5 minutes after 11:30. So I think we can begin, and if anyone else wanders in, we can welcome them. So today we're just going to do an overview of basically the main components of teaching online. It's almost like a table of contents of each subject. So we'll highlight the most important parts. I hope you'll have a lot to take away, and I'd love to have your input. Just ask questions. What would be helpful for you currently or in the future? And in the next coming months, we'll delve deeper into each subtopic.
Sounds good.
I don't know who sales is, but hello. Ah, it's Liliana.
Hi, Liliana. Hi, Liliana.
Howdy.
Good morning.
Two more.
Morning.
Good morning. All right. So I'm going to move ahead, and I'll take a break to ask for input after each subtopic. Sound good?
I'm good.
Hey.
Good.
So can everyone see the screen share?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's go ahead. Press this. So just a brief introduction about where I'm coming from. Some of you have seen this slide before, and I'm only going to highlight the important part for today. So I've had over the past year now, about 56,000 minutes of experience teaching English online, and I've met 965 different students. It's been a pretty crazy experience, and I'm really excited to share some of the things I've learned over this year, and I hope it's helpful to you, and I hope that if you like, you can try it also, because I really feel rewarded from meeting all these people, from helping them, and really just learning a lot of stuff about the world. But I also come at it from the other side. So one of my main hobbies is learning languages. It's why I started teaching English. And I use the same online tutoring that I offer, but I'm the student. So I want to look at it from both directions. What is it like to teach? What do the people I meet enjoy? And then when I go to the class, what do I look for from the tutor and what helps me? So I'm going to bring those two perspectives together in this overview of what it's like to be a tutor online. So this is our 6-month forecast. It's also the table of contents for today's presentation. These are the dates. It's the third Tuesday of every month. And the highlights of what goes into teaching English online really is about how much practice do you need to actually get the result you want from learning a language? What role does the online tutor have currently in this world economy? Because I do believe that the online tutor has a role in the world currently. We'll talk about that. So then we'll talk about, I think we have someone trying to enter. One moment. Maybe not. By the way, if you want to send a message in the chat, I recommend it because it doesn't disappear. And I think I'll get a notification about you saying something. And feel free to raise your voice at any time and ask me a question. So let me check. I'm pretty sure I'm getting something in the chat. Chat 2. What does it say? Test.
So I just did a test just so everybody can see that. And I did mute everybody just for background noise. So if you wanted to say something, make a noise, or you can unmute yourself. Okay.
Okay. In that case, thanks, Tammy. In that case, send a message in the chat if you want to say something, and then we can unmute you so we can hear what you have to say. So we were on the importance of the online tutor. Next is all the free resources that you have online. So there's, to do this kind of work as a volunteer, or if you want to do it just as a side, we say side hustle or a gig job, you can use, it's very low startup costs. Everyone has a phone. Everyone has, most people have a laptop with a webcam and a microphone. So you can just start up and all the materials you need are freely available. We'll talk about scheduling, which is probably a topic that we will have to develop in the future, but we're going to mention it today. And finally, lesson management. So what goes into producing a good lesson for your students? What produces a good experience for the student? All right, any questions before we move on? Oh, I can't hear you. So I'm going to take your silence as a yes, and I'll stop a little longer after the next section. So moving on. So the question is, if you really want to learn a language, how much practice do you need? I don't know if everyone has had the experience of trying to learn a language or succeeding in learning a language, but I'm sure everyone knows that it's a massive project. It takes a lot of work, and there's many languages in the world. So if we are trying to serve our students, what does it take to actually give them the results they need to have this language benefit their lives? There's benefit in itself because you see the world from a different perspective. It's important to train your brain, even if you don't speak it. For example, they say if you study a language, whether or not you finish, the process improves the connections in your brain. So it does keep your brain healthier. I'm not surprised about this. And it can help slow the progression of degenerative brain diseases over time, as far as I've heard. But I am willing to believe it. And I guess that makes learning a language, even if you don't finish, a worthwhile project. So language is a massive project. It's no surprise. Everything in the world has its own name and a new name in every language. So if you can count how many things exist in the world, that's the number of new words you're going to have to memorize to use the language. So it's a really big project. You don't need to memorize everything to get to, I'd call it practical usage, where you can go to a country, ask for directions, and so on. But if you really want to master a language, it's a huge project, and you have to have a plan to beat that project, to actually achieve your goal. Perhaps one of the most difficult things about the language is not just the size, but also the method that it's asking you to do. You are going to have to learn a new way of thinking. If you are trying to speak, for example, Chinese, as far as I've heard, the Chinese grammar does not have the same time system that American English has, that English has. And how does that translate when you're trying to learn it? If I'm trying to learn Chinese, or someone who speaks Chinese is trying to learn English, the separation of things into, well, did this happen in the past? Did this happen in the present? Is it happening currently? Or will it happen in the future? We, as I don't know how you think, but I think in those times, whereas the Chinese grammar system does not have a separation like that. They express that meaning differently. So you are expanding your tools of thinking when you learn a language, and it's a huge project. It's also something useful. So you can spend all the time you want memorizing the names of everything in the world, but you won't have practice using it. And in order to be a master, whether it's of drawing or playing an instrument or your job, you need hours just of experience practicing it. And hopefully it's efficient. So, for example, one common problem I encounter with students from, say, China or Japan is they learned English through their government's education system, their public education system. And that took 12 years. And at the end of it, they still don't speak it. And it's kind of a shame that they didn't get the results that was intended by the system. Basically, they occupied their time, which is a waste in a way. They know information, but now that information is like inert in their mind, and they need the next level of practice still after 12 years. It would be good to have used it while they were taking all that information in. So I'll take a pause. Any questions? If you have a question, just say yes in the chat, and I'll unmute you so I can hear what you have to say. I'll wait 1 minute, maybe 15 seconds. Also, I could probably open up the video and see people's faces. So if you have, another thing I could do is if you have something to say, wave your hand. If you don't wave your hand, no one has anything to say.
Yes, Tim, I have something to say.
Okay, we have two. So one from Kath and one from Liliana. So Liliana, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you. My question is, what's your, or how is your approach to teach, as you say, Chinese that do not have a time frame or sequence of past and present or future event, the way they speak and how they absorb while trying to teach? Because I have a Chinese student, and so it's very difficult for her to grasp that.
Great question.
So I just want to make sure what's your approach on how to have her have a better comprehension of how we use time frame.
Thank you very much. The purpose of language is communication. So when you're having your conversation with the student, and I would recommend that this happens in some kind of conversation because it's an exchange of information. Make sure you have what she's telling you clear in your mind. So you will have to ask questions if something is not clear. If anything she says is ambiguous as to when it happened, that's your opportunity to ask, well, did it happen in the future, the present, or the past? One of my students from Taiwan today, we did that. He told me, what was the word? I think we were learning shut down. It was the vocabulary word. And he said most of the cities were been shut down. Now, grammatically, it's not correct. So I stopped him. I wanted to ask, what did you mean? And I gave him the options. So if you meant it happened in the past, you would say most of the cities were shut down. If it happened in the past and it's still true now, you can say most of the cities have been shut down. If the process is going on now, we say most of the cities are being shut down, and in the future, most of the cities will shut down. So I gave him those options in the chat, and I asked him, which one did you mean? So he gets to see all the tenses, and basically he now has seen how I categorize the information. I separated it into the times. So the chat was really useful because he has the visual that he can see, and also he has me asking him for information. So your job as the tutor is to get the complete picture. And if he has problems with expressing times, you have to ask him, did you mean this time? Was it in the past? Is it more than one if they forget the S? That's how I do it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we also had Kath. Let's see if I can unmute Kath. Unmute. Cool. All right. You're all
Hi.
set to go.
That was a very nice explanation. That
Thank
was
you.
a beautiful explanation. Do you always, so you stand up, you're standing when you do your classes?
You know, so can everyone see me in the video? Okay. So yeah, I invested in this. I have this chair here that I recommend if you like it. I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of like a sit-stand chair, so it's very flexible.
Uh-huh.
But this desk, so I can, it's attached, it's very flexible. This is electric, so it goes up and down, right? And I have this chair here. So if you're on the computer all the time, you don't really want to be like stuck. So if I want to relax, I can do this.
But it does seem more natural to be standing and being able to move and motion. But that's a stool
Yeah, this guy.
over there. So you're not really standing, but you're halfway standing.
It looks more professional too.
To be standing?
Yeah. It gives you, it gives you a sense of being a teacher.
Yes, that's a great point.
It seems very relaxed to me. So
It keeps it keeps the energy high also. I had a big breakfast today, and then I sat down. That was a mistake because I was falling asleep as my student was talking. So it would have been better to be standing.
Anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for asking. So I'm going to remute Kath and remute Liana temporarily. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we talked about this being a useful thing. You need to have your students speak. The reason is, as far as efficiency goes, this is probably the most efficient method to have practice using the language in real time. They have to keep the pace of the conversation to communicate with you. At the same time, they're hearing you talk, and they're hearing words that they have to understand. And they're using words, or they're finding that, oh, I don't know the word for that thing. Could you tell me what it is? Thank you. So everything is in context, and you're practicing a real exchange of information. So in my opinion, nothing substitutes speaking as far as being that fundamental unit of learning, which is why tutoring online is useful around the world. Now, some students might have an opportunity to use English. Maybe they can speak it at home. Maybe now at work they're using it. Maybe they're moving to a country that speaks English. However, other students completely lack those opportunities, which is why the online connection that's now available has really helped a lot of people. Not just because now, if they didn't have it at work or at home or in the country, they can look online, but also because it's flexible. There's so many people around online that probably you can meet somebody, and it's really controllable. So you can find someone who is a really good friend, someone who you really connect with. A lot of advantages. So my recommendations as far as language learning, this comes from teaching my students and also what has worked for me. I organize the hierarchy like this. We'll start at the bottom. The most fundamental unit is you should probably do 30 minutes of speaking daily. That might not be practical, and I know our volunteers in our organization might not be able to meet their student 30 minutes every day, but I'm telling you, probably in order to actually attain your goal, which is to speak this language without ever having a problem, you're probably going to have to stay in shape by speaking 30 minutes every day. If you have more time, you can go up to the next tier. That is 30 minutes of text-based input and then the 30 minutes of speaking. It doesn't necessarily have to be in that order, but I think it actually benefits. The reason I recommend the text-based input is because you can control the pace. You can be, I'm sure, if I'm trying to talk, sometimes I'll lose track of what I'm trying to say and it's hard to communicate. And if I don't speak the language very well, it can be even more difficult. And if you're listening to a professor giving a lecture, if you lose focus for 5 minutes, well, you know, maybe you missed a key point and you're kind of lost. That's one of my problems. I really prefer reading to learn because I can control the pace. And different people learn better from audio input or from visual input. But you learn best from having multiple kinds of input. So I recommend 30 minutes of visual text-based input. Buy yourself a book on the grammar or the vocab and master that. And if you have any questions, well, good. Now you have your speaking lesson after. That's your opportunity to not just have small talk. Small talk is great, but you can ask for help. What does this mean? Am I saying this correctly? Did I write the answer correctly in my workbook? So the two together, I think, is, I would say, the best because it's only an hour. And as you're going to see, the next two levels, now we're asking for more time. So the hour of just doing that text-based input and then speaking is not asking so much. But then we'll go to the next level. So I got 2 in the chat. Let me take a look, see what someone has said. It says, oh, not seeing your screen. So let me look at Kath. I'm going to open up your video. Kath, can you see my screen now? Let me unmute you.
Sharing something. If you are sharing something, I don't see it.
Oh, you don't this whole time?
No, I did previously. Oh, maybe I have. Did I change options? I'm sorry.
That's no trouble.
Everyone sees what the list that you're referring to?
Everyone else can see?
Okay, all right, sorry.
How about you, Kath? Can you see it now?
No, I see your image, but
just
not
my face?
Yes, not what you seem to be sharing.
Okay, so 1 second.
Tim?
Yes.
Excuse me, I was asked by Keenan, I think. I just checked the list of people in the meeting. I don't see my name in the meeting and she cannot see me, or she cannot see who I am. And there's also a Michelle with her camera off. So I don't know how many people you are seeing, but it's very hard to help Keenan to let her see who I am because she's asking me.
I see.
See me.
So let me look at the chat again. So, okay. So let me try one thing first. I'm going to stop the share.
What I did. I see what I did wrong now. I had, I didn't have, I only had your speaker. I was clicked onto speaker image. And now I'm at side-by-side mode. Side-by-side mode.
So you can see.
Under view options. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
No trouble. And so Liliana, let's.
Yes.
If someone can't see you, it might just be that you're not fully displayed because the gallery might not be large enough. You can enlarge it, or there's an arrow in the corner, and you can shift who you're seeing. The people who are arranged at the front, you can shift to seeing who's arranged at the back. So try that also. I can change the size of the window if I want to see more people. I can also minimize it so I see basically nobody. But I'm counting in the meeting. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 people. Okay.
I only have in that corner that you mentioned, I only have a number 6.
So Liana, you got to scroll to the side because you're on an iPhone. I see. Scroll to the side. That's how you can adjust on your iPhone.
Oh, hold on a second. Let me just double check. Adjust. What did you say? To what, right side or left side?
I don't know, whichever way it goes. I think I scroll to the left. So iPhones, because you have a limited screen size, it won't allow you to see everything that we can see on a computer or an iPad.
I noticed that. So there's a little corner that says more, and it's telling me chat, meeting settings, minimize meeting, disconnect audio, and cancel.
Here's what you can try.
Participant.
Try exploring.
And yes, no, go slower, go faster, more.
Yeah, try exploring. I'll check again after the next section and let me know if you still have a problem.
It says invite. So I don't
explore and I'll check in on you in maybe 5 minutes. Okay? So let's we talked about the bottom 2 tiers. Let's talk about the top 2 tiers. If you encounter a lot of information, for example, this presentation, if you encounter a lot of information in this, you might not retain it all, even though it is in your brain. So when I say retain, I mean you kind of have to like strengthen the connection. And you can do that just by doing a brief review. So if you took notes during the meeting, you can check right after, or you can check before going to bed. You can check the next morning. But that review actually does make a big difference as to how well information is transferred from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. So if I were to recommend going from 60 minutes to 90 minutes, I would split it like this. You should have the text-based input, have the conversation, you can ask about it, and then, well, let's think about all that we learned today. Let me check the chat. I think I just got a message. Anything? Text-based, meaning stories, newspapers, text, etc. Good question, Melinda. We'll look at that in a second when we go to the resources. But yes, the text-based is an interesting topic. So last tier is higher proportions of the same. So you can increase your time. If you have 3 hours, by all means, do an hour of each of these. There's also extreme methods. So I have met people who have done something very extreme and they got a good result. For example, I met one person from Algeria and he called me online and he spoke English basically fluently. And I said, how long did it take you to get to this level? And he said, 5 months. I was like, 5 months? That's incredible. He says, well, where I live, no one has any job. So I have all day to watch TV. So I watched English TV for 6 hours every day for 5 months. Now I speak English. I was like, wow, well, congratulations. But that's an extreme method. And maybe his brain is suited to that kind of method. I could try it and have not the same result. But that's something, if you have the time, by all means, increase your studying, do something, a massive project like that. But the practical levels are these 3, in my opinion. All right. Any questions? If you have a question, just raise your hand. Anything like this? Okay, so we're going to move on. Okay, so how can you help a student? This is our section about the importance of the online tutor. So this is something I mentioned earlier. Now we have the ability to connect around the world. It really is creating a worldwide community, and you can do it anywhere at any time. There's always someone to talk with. There's always someone looking to learn. There's always someone willing to teach. And the startup cost, I don't want to use that because it sounds too much like a business. It's really, you don't have to buy materials. You just asked Melinda about the materials you can buy. So if you can see me, I'm going to take off my headphones just for a second, and I'll show you that I do have a library which I bought. One second. So here's just a sample of resources for a teacher. So I might buy a book of games that I can play in a classroom for teens and adults. Some pretty clever ideas in here. So some teachers somewhere in the world spent many years teaching English and decided to record all the cool games that she found and put it in one place. You don't have to buy the book. There's stuff like this online, but sometimes the book is nice. Same thing, this is my grammar resource if I really want to understand problems that students might have about a certain subject, like some versus any. This book will talk about it. So I'll show you. So this is like the section on must. It only takes about a page and a half. And if I want to explain the main points about must to a student, I can pick up this book and cover it. There's also exam resources. So there's resources for free online, and I'll show you some. But if you want to actually buy an official resource from the people who make the test and talk about it with your students, maybe choose some exercises, you can invest in a library if you like. But there's free resources. Learning English is a high demand practice. It's a high demand occupation of people's times. Not the same way in the other direction. If I'm trying to learn Russian, it's really difficult for me to find a variety of materials which are well organized and suited to many different levels. If I wanted to take a test, so if I wanted to go to college in Canada or America, for example, I could take this test and show, yes, I can do the work. But if I wanted to do the same thing for Russian, I would have to go to Russia and take the test there. That test, the IELTS test, you can take anywhere in the world, any week you want. So it's a really different environment for teaching English than it is for other languages. So the material is out there and you can find it. And in so doing, you have a lot of reward for yourself. Like I said, you meet people from around the world. You get to ask any question you like. So what's your holiday like this time of year? How is the economy? How are you dealing with the coronavirus in your country? And it really creates a sense of connection. You build a lot of friendships, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Let's move on. When you do this, you are helping the world economy because through the internet and digital communications technology, business has expanded. It's been this way. Everyone knows there was the huge .com craze in the United States, which crashed, but still, they were right. It's going to change the world. But because of it, one of the tail end consequences is now business can be done around the world anytime, and the language they're using to do it is English, whether it's for business or it's for education. So if you want to go to, for example, I know a student from Shenzhen who wants to get his master's degree in computer science, so he's going to go to Indonesia where they'll speak English at the university. So English is not just being used in business meetings, it's also being used as like a worldwide education language. People from different countries will go to that location in Indonesia and use English to read their materials and conduct their classes. What is the role of the native speaker over and above helping these students? You are a master of this skill. So when they ask you how to speak, you know, because you are part of this community that speaks English. and basically you give them a definitive answer as to how the language should be spoken or should be written, because they might have had many years of education in their country where they had a citizen from their country who has a lot of experience speaking English, but they still don't know if they can truly believe, is that the definitive answer as to how the language is spoken. So you, as a native speaker, have a lot of expertise and authority on this subject, and it's invaluable to them. So let's take a break. I'm going to look at everyone's faces. Do we have any, oops, go back. Do we have any questions? No questions? All right, so let's move on. All right, so choosing resources. Let's skip to bullet 2, because we already talked about the personal library. The almighty screen share, as you can see, is very valuable for being on the same page with the student. When you have something concrete that you want to work through. I'm going to ask, has anyone had problems screen sharing since they've been tutoring? Okay, so we have Melinda. Melinda, could I ask about your experience with the screen sharing?
Every time I try to screen share, it wants me to go into a file that wants me to set securities and this and that and the other thing, which I set, but I can't get out of that do loop there. So actually I'm taking the machine to Tammy tomorrow and we'll fix it.
I see. So
Can I have a
yes,
question?
of course.
Unfortunately, I have not, or I did not see the meetings prior this chat, and I only got to see your first meeting. I didn't set up assisting to regular phone system and texting back and forth, because I've been working with my student in communication because she's having a hard time speaking on the phone and making herself clear. So I've been working on with her, Becky Chen, who is my Chinese student, and her communication skills with the phone. And so she is taping her voice and she's sending me messages. And I sent Tommy, even a singing that she did for me. And so it's the way that I've been teaching her, and I don't have a camera or a setup. Would you mind sending me the information and the directions on how to go about setting it up, please?
Sure. So you mean for like an app like Skype or Zoom?
For what you're doing now, yes.
Yeah,
please.
so I'd be happy to. So
Great.
I'll help you out with that right after the lesson. And of course, Melinda, you were saying that you had some technical issues with your screen sharing.
Yes, I did.
Now, there are many variables to control when you are screen sharing. And it sounds like maybe you had security settings that were interfering.
It said, choose, different, tunes, iPod, iPad, iPhone, whatever, the system that I'm on for emails and stuff like that. And so I picked the email system because that's where I've got tabs for the lessons I'd like to show. And then I get a big, I get a grocery list of, set your priorities, set your security, set this, set that. Okay, so I set everything. And I save it. And I back out. and back in, and it's the same thing every damn time. I must not be hitting the right button somewhere along.
I changed a setting on my internet browser, which makes it so that every time I use the browser, I have to reset everything. So I did that on purpose, because I have Google Chrome and I have Microsoft Edge. So for my Edge one, I have it so that nothing is, all the settings are basically wiped every time.
Mm.
And that one, if you change the settings for something else, like you say remember me and a password, then it won't,
Which I never do.
yeah, then that it won't remember you even though you clicked it, because you have a higher setting which makes it so that nothing is retained. So it might be that you can change everything you like, but somewhere in the chain you have something that says don't retain my changes.
I'm going to bring the Ouija box to Tammy tomorrow. We'll work it out. I don't want to take everybody else's time up with this.
I see. Now Nancy raised her hand.
Yes,
This
so Tim, can you hear me?
Yes.
When you're doing your tutoring, are you using Skype or you're using Zoom?
I use a web application. Primarily, it's built into a website. So basically, I use Google Chrome, which
Okay.
has built-in features. If you go to Google Hangouts, you can have basically the same thing.
Okay.
My second one is Skype. That's the one I use. And then for things like this, I use Zoom. So for most of my
Okay.
English tutoring, I use one website, which has the built-in app for Google. And for the lessons I take, most of them are on Skype. And then if I have a meeting with more than one person, I usually use Zoom. So I use a
Okay.
variety.
So Google Chat could basically do some of the things in terms of screen sharing, et cetera, that Zoom can do.
Yes, yes, it can.
Okay, because I'm trying to learn both. Okay,
Hmm.
that's helpful.
Of course.
I have a question. Maybe you can help me.
Sure.
This is really crazy. As I'm watching you, there is screens messages from Tammy and another person, and it's kind of hard. And then other messages from my phone keep popping up, which I don't know if this is normal in a setting or meetings, because it drives people crazy. You can't focus where you're looking at, and try to read at the same time of what the other people are messaging. As another note, before they were saying, if it felt comfortable to sit down or walk, and during this time, sitting down and doing a conference, it's just whoever's going through a difficult time, it's much more comfortable to do a meeting.
True.
In us, in a relaxed way, I guess.
It does change your mood. We'll talk about that at the end. So it's a good point. Whether you're standing or you're sitting, if you're relaxed or you're high energy, it will really change the mood of the lesson.
Can you see? Can
yes,
you see? Oh, okay. I didn't know if you could see me.
Yeah. Now, if you're getting notifications that are disturbing what you're seeing, probably you can turn them off if you change your settings. But if you use the phone, everything's going to be crammed into the little screen. So the most important thing will occupy most of your attention. So if you get a notification about a message, if the speaker changes, that will change. But you can adjust your settings to suit your needs.
Can everybody listen to me or watching, or no?
Yeah, we could.
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, you
We
can
hear you.
And you can see me as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. Love it. Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you. That's the spirit.
Not at all. So we're doing well on time. Let's continue with the discussion about the resources. Let me just try and minimize it. There we go. So screen sharing takes practice, and choosing your platform, whether it's Google Hangouts is the name, or if it's Skype, you should become familiar with that particular platform because each one has their own features and strengths. But about the resources, there's so many that it's not really a problem, but you should narrow your search based upon what your student's goal is. If they actually are expecting to take an exam in 3 months, the IELTS exam or the TOEFL exam, to test their English level, you should focus on that and do an online search for IELTS topics. If your student is a professional and they just need some business vocabulary, that might be a little more specific, and what you can do is search for some literature from that industry, and you can try reading it and say, do you understand all these words? Yes or no? And if they don't, you can explain it and then use it. Consider your student's level. If they are a beginner, they can't read something advanced. If they're advanced, you don't want to waste their time with something very basic. And also consider if it interests the student. If you choose a topic for news, for example, one topic might produce a very dry response, which is not going to get a good experience for the student. Another topic might be really stimulating and you can have a good conversation. So we're going to look at we're going to do an improv resource search in a second. But you can search in the middle of the lesson if you've never met this person before, or you're like, what do you want to do today? It's like, oh, I don't know, let's read something. Then by all means, do an internet search. But if you have a regular student, you can assign something. So next time, for example, please read this article and make some sentences with the vocabulary, which might be provided for them. I'll show you what that is like. And then we can check it. So basically, you give the student the task, spend 30 minutes before we meet preparing. So let's do an improv search. So let me do stop share. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it again, but it's going to share something else. So let's see if I can do my desktop. Nope. Let me see if I can do with Google Chrome. So open it up. And then I will screen share that. Yes. Okay. So can everyone see this Google Chrome page?
Yes.
Yep.
So suppose I meet a student and they have an IELTS exam coming up. I can do a simple search and I can say IELTS resources. Simple enough. Don't want to go any more specific than that. I'll go down and I'll see that we could click on the first one. Accept our cookies. And we might find that, hey, look, here we have free practice tests that you can work with that you can work together with your students. So let's do a reading practice test. Might have to do some searching. We'll do the academic one, the separation. So here is the instructions to the test taker. And you can read this with your students. So say, please read the instructions, and they'll say, in the actual test, you will be given the following instructions. Do not open this question paper, and so on. And then you can do the reading. So we dove in, and this is what they're going to read. And then at the end of the article, they'll have the questions. Now you can do this with your student. And that's a really substantial lesson, because if they have any questions, if they get something wrong, you can correct them. Let's try something else. Let's suppose that your student wants to learn idioms. So let's do English idioms. we see that Google returns a chart right away that we can use. So here's a useful idiom. Your guess is as good as mine. And you'd say to your student, what do you think that means? I say, oh, I don't know. But you can open it up and probably they have the full chart. Right? The most common English idioms. Thank you, Internet. That's really convenient. Oh, and it's alphabetical. So you can go through this, and this is something that's useful for the student. So far, so good. Pull yourself together. What does it mean? No pain, no gain. And you go over it, you explain what it means, and you ask the student, well, can you use it in an example? And the student will. So that's in itself simple, easy, and substantial for the student. If they're doing, I happen to know this resource is good, so I'm going to look at it. We'll do IELTS speaking resources. We'll just do IELTS speaking. And I look and I find the top result. Let's look at this one. And we can look and see that the speaking test for the IELTS has 3 sections. So we can open up the part 1 topics. It's easy enough. 12 questions based on 3 topics. Work. What is your job? Where do you work? Study. Why did you choose that subject? So this is the first level of the IELTS exam, and you can work with this with your student and see what they have to say as their answer. If they make any mistakes, you can take notes and correct it. I use my phone. I set up my timer on my phone, just like this with the stopwatch. If you can see it counting up. And I'll tell them that a good score on the exam is to speak continuously for 2 minutes. And so when they finish, I can say that was good, but that was only 50 seconds. So let's try another question. And this time, try and speak for 1 minute longer. Let's go to the part 2 questions. Actually, to part 3. It's more interesting. So part 3, same thing. I'll ask them to choose a topic. Do you want to talk about clothes, education, or family? And they'll say, let's talk about family. And these are questions from the test. What role do grandparents play in the family in your country? And then they can try to answer as if this was the real test. It's useful practice. Now, we've recommended another website before. I recommend it because this is what the students will bring. So if I've met 1,000 students, which resource do they always bring? It's this one, which is engu.com. Can everyone see? And 90% of the time, they want to use a daily news article. So let's go back. I don't want to move so quickly. So this is the materials page. It has many different subtopics, which you can choose depending on your students' interests or goals. Look, they have their own IELTS speaking practice. And you can control it based on the level. Let's say we want intermediate to advanced. A filter. So I guess we still have the news available. Let's try again. So we open up the daily news to see what we have. And you have these pre-prepared articles, which they can choose to learn something interesting and at the same time learn some relevant vocabulary. This is one I use today. In fact, I told you about that student from Taiwan. This is the article we were working on at the time. Let me check the chat. Is Engu free to use? Yes, it is free. You might have noticed that it said sign up at the beginning. I don't know who would, because everything is completely free. So I guess if I had a website and I wanted it to be free, I could also give the option, do you want to pay? And people would say, yes, I do want to pay, just because they're generous. So it's like, it's basically a donate button, I'm guessing. So this was the topic he chose. He thought it was interesting. And what this organization does is they find articles in, say, the Associated Press or on The Guardian, for example, and they'll take the article as inspiration and they'll basically summarize it this way. The language might be simplified to suit a level, and then they'll pick out the key vocabulary and they'll arrange it here. So this is the part one. They'll, based on, this is all normalized, so they know if you're intermediate that these are vocabulary items that are useful for you at this level. The word, the noun, feature, the verb, create, noun, marketing. I'm emphasizing the type of word it is because it does actually cause not a problem, but it's a really broad topic. Here we have post the noun, and this post is if you make a Facebook post, for example. We know if I have a fence post, it's something different. It's a different noun. There's also the verb to post. So I posted the sign. It's a lot of words have many different meanings. So it's important to emphasize, well, can you give me an example? And then they'll use the verb. And I say, no, that's great. That's correct. But we're trying to use post with this meaning. It's a good exercise. So yeah, like I said, shut down. Like I said, the cities, most of the cities are shutting down, was our sentence. So what we do is we read it, we check the pronunciation, read the meaning, and then read the example. Any questions? Yes, no? Okay. Can you use it in an original sentence? That's the most important thing. Some students want to just read the list and they don't realize that they didn't transfer this word into their long-term memory. The way you do that is by checking. Okay, now that you've seen an example, you can pronounce it, try to use it. That's the essential step. Okay, so after you cover the vocabulary, then they can read something interesting and you learn something interesting. So I really like my job. It's not the only thing I do, but I like doing this first thing in the morning because you get to meet somebody, you get to be friends with them, you get to learn about the world together and help them do something that'll benefit their career, which is pretty cool. So you read it, maybe they'll have their own comments, but if not, you have tiered questions. This is a comprehension section. And this is a more advanced discussion section. And then finally, even more abstract. For example, now we have a quote. I thought the invention of mobile phone was to save our time and money, but we are doing exactly the opposite. From Srinivas Shenoy. So then the question is, how do you interpret this quote from this person? You can stimulate some pretty interesting conversation. All right, so that's a brief survey of what you can find with, just impromptu on the internet to make a good lesson. So I'm going to stop screen sharing just for a second.
Quick
Any
question.
questions? Go ahead.
Yes. How do you protect, since you're in connection with international students, how do you protect yourself from potential hoppers and people that could put you in danger?
Well, that's a great question. So you remember I told you about that student from Algeria who learned English by watching 6 hours of TV? He came back later and he learned how to program with Python, which actually JavaScript, I'm sorry. So he has all kinds of free time. He came back and I could immediately tell something was strange with my screen. So he came and he said, oh, so I learned how to do JavaScript. Now I can do all this kind of stuff. And he kept changing some stuff on the screen. I was like, great. But it was unsettling.
The reason why I tell you It's because 12 years ago, when I was going through the most difficult time and I started learning about technology and computer, I started trying to set up a Skype so I could communicate with my son and children who were away from Connecticut or in the areas of Connecticut, and tried to connect with families international, also through FaceTime who had come up, but they didn't have the camera system at the time, 12 years ago. So all of a sudden, my Skype got hacked with predators, and that AARP in the past magazine, you know, AARP
Yes.
magazine, you know what I'm talking about? Some people do, some people are signed up. It's for adults. It's sort of like an insurance.
For old people, but it's a really good magazine.
And it has a lot of a discount program, right? So what happens is that they mention in that magazine the kind of fraud and hacking, this kind of international connection technology that we have. It's like a double weapon. So I was not only hacking my Skype, but this kind of romance predator, then and sexual predators as well, who have been harassing me for years. But also in my Facebook, have a whole bunch of people also from Africa and other countries as well. And recently in Instagram, there was they take pictures and they use it as if it was they steal identity, basically. And so then they start a communication. And if you fall in the trap, they get to call you in either WhatsApp or something. And you catch them because as they write, I don't know if you ever read Hemingway book, The Man by the Sea.
Old Man in the Sea, yeah.
You know how he writes, and you could tell by his writing that he's a foreigner. So as he started writing with a certain type of accent. So he was telling me he was from Texas. He was a young, blonde person with a child, right? So all of a sudden I said, whose child is this, you know? And he goes, no, it's my grandchild. And he started doing a conniving situation to make me fall in a trap.
Now, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's a great question as to how can you protect yourself on the internet? It's true that this technology, with the exposure you have, that now you have potential for good and potential for evil. The technology becomes more sophisticated security-wise as time progresses. And in my opinion, usually you can rely on the company to get a resolution for most problems, technical or with certain users. Depending on how you're connecting with students, you might encounter someone who you don't want to encounter. Not just someone who you don't have a good relationship with, because sometimes you meet a student who you're boring to or they're boring to you. But if you have kind of like a gatekeeper organization, like the literacy volunteers, anyone who works with us or any student we get is not going to be a bad actor. And if we somehow let a bad actor in, they deceived us on some level. And we'd have to fix that. If you use what I use, which is kind of like a marketplace where I'm online and people can call me, or the tutor is online and I can call them if I'm the student, then that basically makes you more exposed. And you have blocking features. So you just have like a ban feature. And we can do that with this meeting. There's a password, I think, or you need permission from the host to get in. But there are controls. And if you use the controls intelligently, you have no danger for yourself.
My point is just because since this was exposed in the AARP magazine as well, it's because they have they have been stealing identity, and through that also, you know, information and credit cards and all that stuff, and caused a lot of fraud. So this is a huge problem, and I just wonder, you know, when you're asking or inviting or making a class to international student, how do you protect yourself from this situation?
Well, for tutors, it's easy to control because it's like hiring. You go through kind of like an interview process. Online, probably you just make an introduction video and you show that you're a real person, you invested in this, and you can select people who obviously are not, who don't care about this, you won't let in, because so many people want to get in that if this person isn't wearing a suit and doesn't have high quality technology, then, well, you know, he's kind of handicapping himself. We're not going to let this person take part in this party, basically. For the students on the other side, it's more difficult, but they have to pay, usually. So think about that. Usually they have to buy subscriptions, and that is a big barrier to getting in. So if you're not serious, you wouldn't be in this situation, and you wouldn't forfeit your subscription money, which you already paid, to do something ridiculous. At the same time, this is important for people. They want to learn English. So they probably, the vast majority of people you'll meet are serious. In my experience, I haven't met any bad actors. Even that person I told you about, the hacker from Algeria, he's a good guy. He just wanted to show off. He's like, look what I can do. See, I learned English and now I learned programming. It's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, but you see, even for example, actors, a couple actors that I come across, even Oprah have a Facebook fake and a LinkedIn page and videos and things like that of somebody that has taken things from her page and made a page of her. And so it's a Facebook owner who had also been used as a someone that is advertising something for a prize or something like that, and it's just a hacker. So I was sent a message from Facebook and other places on how to block and just report and do that. And so I've been doing that since I realized this is a whole bunch of, you know, a dangerous situation, a two-way, because they have face recognition tape, and they will tape you, and then they will use you as you were the teacher, and somebody else will take your identity.
It's a great question. I think I wrote it down because I want to like explore it further. You want to always be ahead of the game and foresee potential problems. So we'll talk about security again in the future, but we only have a few minutes left. We're almost done, but I want to make sure that everyone gets to see all the contents that we're going to offer over the next few months. And then if you have individual questions, I'll address them at the end. Sound good?
Oh, that's great.
So let me screen share one more time. We're going to go back to the slideshow. It's this one. And share. Okay, so moving on. Scheduling. So actually our security discussion basically talked about the methods of scheduling. As what we do with the literacy volunteers is we have tutors who state their availability, and we have students who state their availability. We try to find a good match, and then if the match is good, we allow the tutor and the student to negotiate a time. And you don't have, like we said at the beginning, 30 minutes per day is ideal of practice, but we don't ask our tutors to do 30 minutes every day. However, if you multiply 30 minutes times 7, the total time of practice per week is 3.5 hours. So if you meet your student for an hour lesson or 90 minutes, you chop off a big chunk of what it takes to learn the language. If it's 90 minutes, that's almost half of what it takes to learn a language at a decent pace. So we really appreciate meeting with the students. If you meet twice a week, basically you finish their job for them. But it'd be great if we had a flexible system available at any time. So we don't have that currently, but who knows what we'll offer in the future. So we're just going to move on from scheduling. It's a developing topic. So this is maybe the most interesting topic, in my opinion, which is basically the human interaction part of teaching the language. Let's check the chat. Oops, go back. Because I know I saw something in the chat. What does it say? Nothing. It's not showing me. All right, cool. So let's move on. I'm here to help online lesson management for tutors. When you have your lesson, you don't want to just waste time having fun. But if you don't offer that kind of positive experience for the students, in my opinion, it's not a sustainable practice. Your student will continue to be engaged with the lesson. They will be relaxed and able to absorb information only if you provide that good, positive communication experience. So this graphic here is kind of accurate. I want to weigh a little more heavily that human relationship aspect, and we'll talk about that. But on the other side, the main component of what you'll be doing in your teaching is giving feedback and giving correction at a reasonable pace. We've said before that if you correct every mistake that your student makes, whether it's grammar, or if it's a switched vocabulary word, or if it's pronunciation, you will stop them at every syllable and they won't be able to talk, and that won't create that positive communication experience. As far as what goes into the communication experience, I think there's 3 elements. There's control, trust, and enjoyment. You can affect these. I should say you should calibrate yourself to the student's personality. Before this, a half hour before this lesson started, I had my last online lesson today, and he was a very serious person. So, sat down. I didn't have to smile or joke. We just talked analytically about the subject. That was enjoyment for him. But before that, I had maybe 12-year-old from Korea, and so we had kind of a good time. So you have to match your student's personality.
So
Yes, let me open up. Who's talking? Nobody? Okay. So
did he say aneo aseo?
are you talking, Liliana?
Yes. Did he say aneo aseo?
Oh, is that Korean?
Yes.
No, he speaks almost fluent English. He lived in Texas for a while. But yeah. So trust. That's based on your professionalism. It's like the balance between professionalism and having that personal connection. So you can't, if you're having a conversation, you can't just dive in. So, where do you live? How many people in your family? And so on. And that's okay. But if you have a natural progression of friendship, and depending on their personality, some people don't want to be friends. And, sometimes maybe you want to have friends as a teacher, and you hope that that student finds a better match. So that's part of the benefit of having a large market. Control is, since you are the native speaker for the language, the burden of the conversation should probably be on you, unless the person has something they want to say. Like they come and they say, Tim, I have an interview and this is my introduction for myself. Can you check it? Say, okay. Then basically they will just speak and you can correct their grammar. But if you're having a conversation, the person who's moving the conversation forward has to be you, and you should ask questions. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. It's basically going to reiterate what we just said. So the positive learning experience. You must like teaching the student, and the student must like learning from you. So that, if you can do that, that's step number one, and basically everything else is going to fall into place. As far as what kind of feedback you give to the student, remember, the student must not be discouraged or frustrated. A good rate for providing feedback or correction is 1 significant correction every 5 minutes. It can be kind of pedantic to make a insubstantial correction. It's like, oh, you know, we actually don't really say that word, we say the other thing, but what you said is okay. They'll be like, well, thanks. I guess that doesn't tell me anything important. Okay. Next is the student must believe you can help them, that you can be patient and help them communicate. That's the trust aspect again. So professionally, do you know what you're talking about? Personally, can you be patient in this difficult communication situation? And can you take the lead in controlling the conversation? And that's a skill. So you get to practice the art of conversation. And you will be asking the questions. So by all means, take advantage of this opportunity to learn about another culture. The more you learn, the more you ask about, you know, what's your country's culture like, the more they speak and the more rewarding it is for you. So that's the effect section of this. And that's everything. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and let's do one more round of questions. Any questions? We got one from David.
Tim, as far as, let's see, you try to prepare a document you hope to use as a lesson with the students in the class. Where should you save that to be able to access it? If you're familiar with the, you know, the Zoom screen share, if you touch it, it comes up with a list of possible places to draw information from. I haven't been able to create a document, find it, and display it using screen share.
Great question. So it seems, based on what we did with this lesson, I didn't have Google Chrome open before I did the resource search. And so when I opened up the screen share to see what I could share, it didn't have desktop, so I couldn't just go to my desktop and find it.
Yeah.
I had to consider which windows did I already have open. That means if you have a document, you can save it anywhere you like on your computer, but in order to screen share it, you're going to have to open it at some point and then activate screen share. Same thing with the Google Chrome. I checked, it's like, well, Google Chrome isn't here. So I exited screen share, I opened Google Chrome, and then I activated screen share again. And that's how I was able to look at it.
Thanks, Tim.
Of course. Any other questions? All right. So I think we're right on time. We wanted to end about 1 o'clock. So we have 7 minutes to spare. Good time, everybody.
Thanks, Tim.
Of course. So I'm going to end the meeting. If anyone wants a copy of the PowerPoint, you can email Tammy or myself, and we'll follow up with you. And Liliana, I promised that we'd talk about some technical things. So we'll do that right now.
Thank you. I
So,
appreciate it.
Thanks everybody for coming, and I'll see you next month.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Tim.
Tim.
Of course.
You could tell there was
Thank
a lot
you.
of preparation in there. It was really well done. Thanks.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.